I heard someone say that a smart man learns from his experiences, but a wise man learns from the experiences of others. As tradespeople, we're in a unique position because we see everything that can go wrong and does go wrong when it comes to maintaining and repairing your home. Sometimes when we go out and help someone after we're done, the homeowner feels like, well, that was really simple. If I only would have known, fill in the blank, I could have avoided paying you to do, whatever they're dealing with, right? And that's what we're going to be talking about on this episode of In the House, furnace problems that homeowners unknowingly cause themselves. Let's go. In the House is an Any Hour Services podcast where we talk about things homeowners should know when it comes to maintaining and repairing their homes. I'm Mike Wilson, and today I've got Richard and Kevin, managers of the HVAC maintenance, service, and install departments at Any Hour Services. How long have you guys been in the HVAC industry?
21 years.
21?
22.
22, that's a long time. You guys are perfect for this because I wanted to talk about common homeowner caused problems, things that they might not even realize that they're doing to cause their own furnaces to not work the way that they should. And so as you guys have been doing this, I'm sure you could talk about it endlessly with all of that experience that you have, but let's try and narrow this down to like a top 5. Okay. Top 5 things that homeowners do to cause their own furnace problems. Just so people know that these were your top 5 things. We did talk before the show so that I had a list of the things. So I'll give you the top 5. Okay. Well, I'm going to give you one at a time. We'll go backwards so that the suspense is like building. Number 5, blocking the exhaust outside of a high efficient furnace. Why is that number 5?
What happens is a lot of times we put barbecues or we store stuff out on a patio or something that where we're going to, under the shed or somewhere that we just don't think of because it's just up against something. And that furnace needs exhaust. It's got to kick it outside the house, but it also has intake, what brings it inside. And so by blocking that, it can either block it completely and it shuts it down, or it can cause a little turbulence where it brings back the exhaust and the flames flutter, and then they just shut down the furnace. So we see that quite a bit, actually. Garbage cans in the way, barbecues, lawn chairs. They've been out in the yard, and now they bring them somewhere else and store them, and they
just stack them up beside the house. And so you've got. Go ahead, Kevin.
I was just gonna say, if you have enough stuff blocking it, you won't even push enough to be able to close what's called a pressure switch in the furnace. It won't even kick on. So
gotcha. Yeah, that's something where like when we get like a really heavy snow, I'll tell people like, hey, pay attention to where your exhaust is, because if the snow comes up and covers it, that can cause the issue. But I didn't even think about homeowners like just stacking stuff around it themselves.
All sorts of stuff. Wood piles.
Yep.
Just boxes of just randomness,
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's there. It becomes part of the house. You don't even think about it. So you just put something right in front of it and block it, and then next thing you know, you're calling for a furnace problem.
Another thing I've seen a few times is particularly with they call it a concentric kit, 2 pipes converge into one, and people are putting stuff around and they drop something on it and it knocks the cap off. And I've had it mess with pressure switches just because you've got combustion air and flue, and it's just not able to do what it's supposed to because they're not separate.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah, that you said cause turbulence, so it's trying to exhaust the air. It's supposed to have room to like take it out straight so that it can pull in fresh air, because it needs oxygen, right? And so that stuff that's coming out is the gas that is not oxygen, right? Mm-hmm. So, all right, cool. So number 5, blocked exhaust outside. So I guess how to prevent it: go walk around outside and make sure you don't have anything blocked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Know where your exhaust is, I guess. I would say it's probably a good idea also, if you've got kids, to like make sure that they know where that's at, because it's a good chance that they're the ones not putting things back where they go, and they're the ones stacking the lawn chairs and all that stuff around it.
Another thing that might be good when you're showing your kids where it's at is make sure they know not to put things in it.
Oh.
I mean,
baseballs,
golf balls, grocery bags. It's all stuff that we've pulled out that kids have just kind of, they see a little opening and they're like, hey, what can we fit in there?
That's good to know. Do they have wire covers on them, like a mesh cover?
Some, you can find some that have just a small wire mesh thing that you can put over them. Most of them don't come with it, like actually built into it.
Gotcha.
It's kind of tough in our climate because if you put something that blocks it too much, that does create a little moisture and then it freezes and then you've got a whole block frozen.
One that you see commonly used is it's got a couple of bars that'll go across the front and,
Yeah, it just prevents somebody from putting a ball or something in it.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it just kind of blocks it.
Okay. Number 4. A repair that seems simple, so a homeowner decides to try it themselves.
YouTube. Saw it on YouTube. I'm going to do it now.
They probably saw it in an email that Mike sent out.
That could be true. YouTube certified, we call that.
Yeah.
You know what? I got to being someone who uses YouTube, because let me tell you, I'm an amazing mechanic with YouTube. I've been able to fix tons of stuff, but even me, there's some things
How much
where
have you broke too?
Nothing yet, because I know when that line is. You know what I mean?
I think you know where that line is because you're a technician.
Well, exactly, because
right?
this is the kind of stuff I see and do, So
okay, so what are the common things that people break when they try and do it themselves?
They'll do a Google search or a YouTube search, and I'll talk. One of the things that we see a lot is clean the flame sensor. If the flame turns on or it doesn't turn on, clean the flame sensor. Someone will tear it apart and try to clean it, and it'll actually be the igniter they're cleaning, and they'll break it. So now they've got a broken igniter.
Gotcha.
And maybe they cleaned them both, so maybe they got it, but they
that makes sense.
They didn't get confused between what's what.
In their defense, the igniter does look like it's crusted over with stuff and needs to be cleaned.
Yeah,
Can have some white, carbon buildup.
But keep going.
There's wires, in the process of taking something apart or cleaning
Get them
it.
crossed up.
They crossed up or left off.
it's
or
easy to
something.
knock them off.
Yeah, it's as someone that produces that DIY content for people, I'm trying to be helpful, but I totally recognize that. And I say in every single video that, like, hey, if you ever feel like you've gotten in over your head, stop and call somebody that you trust for some help. And so I always like to consult with you guys and find out what are the most common mistakes that people make when they are trying to do that stuff themselves. Because like Kevin, or even like me, like you, if you are mechanically minded or like good with your hands, there's plenty of stuff that you can do that you, like if someone just showed you how to do it because you know what you're doing and you're comfortable working with tools and things, it's no problem with you trying to do that. The problem is like when you don't quite have enough training and you don't quite know what you're doing. So if you are, I guess the way to prevent it is if you are going to try that stuff yourself, like don't just like rush in like you're like I remember those, or not, I'm thinking of someone specific that I'm not going to name, but you probably know people like this, the guy that goes and gets the furniture from the store, but doesn't even look at the instructions when they go to put it together. And there's parts left over, or it's not quite as sturdy as it was in the store display.
I love instructions. My wife makes fun of me because we got a toaster for Christmas a couple years ago, and I read the instructions on a toaster. She was making fun of me, and I pointed out, I'm like, what does this bagel button do? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, I'm about to find out, and I'm not telling you.
Your
pretty sure it makes bagels
so bad when you cook them.
But I look at it as the instructions are a cheat code.
Yeah, I'm a weird dude. I like watching infomercials, and I like looking at owner's manuals. Now, I don't read the whole thing. I just go to the maintenance section to find out, like, oh, I'm supposed to do that?
I get those text messages. So it says in the owner's manual. Yes, it does, Mike.
Yeah, I was like, I never realized that.
The one thing you said that's important, too, is if you feel like you're getting over your head, stop. Like, because you can make it worse. It's better off to, hey, let's get a professional out there and let's let them tidy it up and finish doing it before you break more stuff.
I would say rule of thumb, if you've never worked on your furnace before and you have to like loosen more than 5 screws or 5 bolts, like double think what you're doing.
Well, maybe you don't. I was going to say, you know yourself better than anybody. Ask yourself this question. Am I mechanically inclined? Is this something I should be getting into? You know what I mean?
Have you ever met somebody that thought they were, but they weren't?
Yeah, that's why I hesitated on that at the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
well, I know that like my memory isn't super good, and when I'm doing something that I have never done before, and I'm worried about, like, that's a lot of wires. Like, I take pictures, I draw diagrams, I do everything I can. Even in my DIY videos that I'm doing, I tell people like, hey, it's a good idea to do this. I'm not doing that to just remind you it's a good idea. I'm doing that because Cam is filming me and he's seeing me do it. And I'm like, yeah, that's one of the steps. Take a picture and draw a diagram. Anyway, okay.
Cheat code.
Right. So anyway, all right. So that's number 4. The repairs seem simple, so you try and make them yourselves, and maybe you aren't quite as experienced doing that. So, okay, number 3, thermostats. Talk to me about how homeowners cause their own problems when it comes to their thermostat.
And there's a couple here. Just the programming itself. Try to program it without reading the instructions. Get the AMs and PMs mixed up and you didn't notice it. So just the programming itself can be sometimes a problem why it's not heating properly.
Okay. What else?
Something that Richard had mentioned before was they're swapping thermostats, and they may wire everything up right, but in the process of doing it and taking things apart, they'll see a little spark or hear a little spark, or maybe they don't even see it, but what you've done is popped a fuse down on the furnace, and now you got to go searching for a fuse.
Yeah, it's wired up properly, but the fuse is blown.
What else on thermostats?
The switch is set to not heat, as crazy as that sounds. We do get those calls, not so much in the middle of the winter, but the first of the winter, or, first couple that my furnace doesn't turn on or whatever. The switch, if it's like a touch screen and the thermostat's a little more confusing and not understanding it, that's one.
Can't tell you how often I've gone out to a call that was, my furnace is blowing air and it's blowing cold air and it doesn't ever stop. And you walk over and their fan switch is on instead of auto. Just a simple, look a little closer at your thermostat.
So they went over to the thermostat to turn it on, and they turned the fan on. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Any other common thermostat issues?
Aside from like batteries going bad, you
Right.
just didn't double check.
Right. They don't cause that, but I mean, if they go unchanged for a while, then that's definitely something that you could check there. Okay. So number 3, registers and return airs, or vents, the supply vents and the return vents being blocked or covered. Talk to us about that.
It's super common for people when you get in the house and you put your furniture out not to notice the grills on the wall. The grills are flat. Where the ones that are on the wall, except for in some older homes, usually they're return air. It's the air that's coming back to feed the system. And usually there's not as many of them in the house. There's some houses around them. I only have 2 or 1, 3, 4. But if you block one off and you've got 4 of them, you've blocked off essentially 25% of your air going back to the furnace.
For me, my house is a little bit older. My registers are in the floor, the supply vents, and the covers, they're just old and beat up. Sometimes it feels like just with the thing blowing, it can like blow them shut, or like the slightest vibration they can like close. Or in my kids' room, they would like put like bean bags or like their dirty clothes, even though the hamper is sitting right there next to it. Like they're not allowed to put the clothes in the hamper. They have to cover the vents. Anyway.
Yeah, things just get set there and just not thinking it's just floor. A lot of them are below a window, so somebody stands on the register as they're looking in the window and they kick the little knob that closes it.
That's a good one.
So
something that I've noticed people do too is, depending on the house, sometimes people like these decorative grills, right? I've got some in-laws. I was actually trying to help them figure out an issue with their stuff last year, and I tell you, their grills that they had were awful. Their register covers. It was a slide thing rather than a metal louver, right? And so it didn't matter if it was open. You were losing like a 1/4 inch every 3/8 of it. I mean, it was like the whole way across. It was losing tons of surface area to be able to blow through. I mean, you can do that to yourself by putting some of those decorative types on.
There are a lot. I've seen them on Instagram recently where it's a new interior design thing where you have the register and it's got a little channel on the outside of it, but it's like completely
I know what you're talking
covered.
about.
You know what I mean? And so I look at that and I'm like, that looks super awesome. And then I remember like, how's that thing gonna like get enough air through there?
Yeah, these new vents that close off on their own that have batteries. I mean, by the time you put that in alone, it's blocking it and then it's shutting it down. It's not good for your system.
Wood registers too.
I was gonna say hardwood. When you're putting hardware floor in, they sell you
cut
those
it down
custom
by
registers.
75%.
Wow.
So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, we've had service calls alone. We just changed the registers out and the houses work great.
Interesting.
Buy a new piece of furniture or an entertainment stand, don't block the returns or the supply vents.
It's almost like you should like have somebody design where the furniture is going to go before you actually build the house or something.
Right?
But no one does that. So anyway, all right. So cool. Watch, make sure, go around the house, make sure the vents are open, and make sure you don't have furniture blocking a return air.
Well, I was just going to say, one other thing that I actually have seen a lot is pet beds. People will put their pet, and maybe it's because the pet likes the feel of the air going across them or what, but I've seen a lot of returns where the pet bed is there and the dog decides, or they lay against it, and it's amazing how how fast their filters fill up with pet hair and everything else just by the dog laying there and having that be there.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that actually leads us into our number one thing. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. That was my impression of a drum roll.
And that was number 3 for some reason.
Wait.
I lost track.
No. Okay. So
not a mathematician.
Just to recap. Number 5, blocking the exhaust on a high efficient furnace outside. Number 4, repairs seem simple. You try them, but maybe you didn't do that good a job. Number 3, thermostats.
It's the one I forgot.
Number 2, supply vents and returns being blocked or shut off. Number 1, maybe insert a drum roll there that actually sounds good. Okay, so number 1, filters. And, a common thing with filters is that you are supposed to look at the airflow direction arrow on the filter and have it pointing towards the furnace. That's the proper way for the air to flow. And for some reason, where did the song
you
even
came
pop
up
in
with
my
it?
head?
I have no idea.
Well, no, I was saying follow something anyway. So somehow Follow the Yellow Brick Road came up, and then I was thinking I had that song in my head, and so then it was like Follow the Yellow Brick Road, but then road and airflow. I was trying to figure it out. I was like, so follow the arrow for flow. Doop, doop. Follow the arrow for flow. Doop, doop. And you're welcome.
That was awesome.
All right, so furnace filters. Let's talk about all of the mistakes that people can and do make when it comes to their filters.
Not changing the filter.
Okay, number 1.
Yeah.
That seems obvious enough.
Changing it with the wrong size. A lot of people put one that's too small or too big and just kind of cram it in.
So when you say the wrong size, there's different dimensions, right? You've got length, width. Does that matter as well? Like as far as the quote right size?
Yeah.
So look at the opening where the filter goes and make sure that the filter you're putting in is the same depth or the same whatever thickness. And then how do you know like what size filter you're supposed to be putting in?
If you stick a filter in, you slide it all the way to the back, right? Because you're going to, depending on your typical setup where it slides in next to the furnace, and it either slides in extra far to where you can't reach the filter anymore if it's going to be all the way back, or it doesn't reach all the way back if you have it to the front, that's too small. It needs to be able to cover the entire amount of the whole depth going into the ductwork. And then height-wise, too. I've seen people where it's the right depth, and they slide it in, and they're a couple inches too short. So you got air just bypassing the filter, going right over the top of it.
What else with filters?
On just real quick on that one, if you put your filter in and you can see the air is going to go around it, it's not the right size.
Okay.
So I would say another one that we get is if the filter's inside the door panel where you have to take the door covers off, the door panel doesn't get on properly, so the little safety switch, we call it door switch, doesn't get pressed in, and it prevents the furnace from actually turning on.
So to try and explain that for people that are listening, some people have a separate little cabinet next to the furnace where the filter is, and you don't have to mess with the furnace itself. You've got a filter rack, right? And so you change the filter and you never have to take the front cover off of the furnace. Other people have a furnace where you have to take the door off and you have to slide the filters inside down by the blower motor. Is that what you're talking about? Yep. And so then when you put that bottom cover back on, that safety switch doesn't get compressed and your system will never turn back on because that's not being depressed or compressed.
Another way that it's done that's super common is in your return drop or the duct that's beside the furnace, there's like a slide panel that'll slide up and the filter's just inside there and it just goes in and probably leans against the furnace.
Yep.
And I see people where they put them in there and they lean them the wrong direction and they just leave it completely open. And the other thing that they'll
Their
do,
filter never gets dirty.
it's like, it's so clean.
My house is so clean.
But I've seen other ones where, talking about thickness, they'll stick a extra wide filter in there. And now what they're doing is, and it's leaning the right direction, but now they've taken a lot of that drop and cut the actual amount of air that's able to get down and go through there. So a few things that you can do wrong.
I've heard you guys talking also before about getting a really high MERV rating filter. So like you have a basic filter in, and then maybe you hear that like, oh, it's pollen season. So you go to the hardware store and you get one that's like super fancy, right? Or it's really expensive, which means it's like tighter knit, smaller openings. The pollen and the particles and things aren't going to get through, but neither do the air molecules.
Yeah, there can be some because of the airflow we talked about, it can, if you get too thick of a filter, too restricting, it can definitely cause problems on your furnace to overheat and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
The other one that I've seen people do is they want a thicker filter, so rather than just getting the 4-inch filter, they just put 4 1-inch filters together.
That doesn't work?
Genius.
Definitely does not work. Now it's trying to go through 4 filters.
Okay. Well, kudos to that guy, because it's like, well, at least
That's
I'll
what you
always
call a
have.
thinker.
I'll always have one clean one, and I'm only having to replace that other one, right?
Yeah.
And then if I ever forget to get filters, I just pull that one out, and at least I got an extra. That's
I've had
Genius.
I've had to take the plastic off filters before.
really
Yep. My
All
customer
right.
puts it in and just forgot, or had their son or whatever change the filter, and call, and my furnace is whistling where it's never done this before. And then we go there and the plastic's still on the filter. Yep, we've had that.
I got
So make
good
sure to
news
take the
and I got
plastic off.
Bad news.
Good news, simple fix.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, and that's the whole point of this episode. Those are some of the simple things that, like, when a homeowner realizes that they just paid you to come out and unwrap the filter, to take the packing material off of it. So, just take a little bit extra time, pay attention to what you're doing. And, there's a reason that people, that people are trained to come out and do this. I'm going to give them a bonus. I don't know, since we went from 5 to 1, I don't know if this one would be like 0 or anyway, we're just going to call this the bonus. A big thing that people do that cause their own furnace problems. And I would actually say it's neglect to have the annual maintenance done, because there's so many things, all of these little things that we talk about. Like I feel like I talk about annual maintenance all the time, and I feel like Richard's always trying to give money off on the service, but we're not going to let him talk today. But this annual maintenance, it is really important. And honestly, if you would rather not think about doing all of that stuff, that's another reason to make sure that you've got a company that you trust and that you work with, and make sure you're having that annual maintenance done. So there's a bunch of things that you can check yourself that you need to be aware of and stay on top of, but it's a good idea to have a company that you trust and just get that maintenance done. Same way you go and get the oil changed on your car. Call a company. They can schedule it out for as far as you want, and more than likely, if they're worth their salt, they'll be able to call you and remind you that hey, it's time, it's coming up, or text you or something. At least I know we do that at Any Hour Services. So anyway, any last thoughts?
Give us a call. We can help out. I was thinking when you said that, I was like, I should just really just go ahead and just throw that out anyways, Mike.
I thought that's what you were about to do.
I was going to Mike tried to say no, but if you want to give us a call, we're happy to come out. It's $29 to come out. We're happy to help you.
There he goes.
Goodness gracious.
Look, we try
you
try
didn't
and
cut
do
my
specials.
mic. You didn't cut my mic off.
Can we install a button what is it, in the radio and the TV? They have a dump button. I think that's what it is. So if somebody says something they're not supposed to, there's a 3-second delay, and you can hit the dump button, and it cuts it out for a little bit. But
what you need is a trap door.
That would be more entertaining.
I think a eject seat would be more entertaining than a trap door.
Well, it's really turned into the podcast special. So if you are listening to this episode and you haven't had your furnace serviced yet this year, give us a call. It doesn't matter when this episode aired, as long as when you call in, you mention that I was listening to the podcast and Richard said that I could actually, so that way, if anyone gets in trouble, it's not the host of the show, it's the guests, and we have to do what the guests say. So anyway, normally we charge $99 to come out and do all the manufacturer's recommended maintenance and inspection items. But if you call and mention that you heard Richard offer this discount on the podcast, we'll give you $70 off and we'll tune your furnace up for only $29. So anyway, take advantage of it. The biggest reason that people don't do it is because they forget. And so that's why I lumped it in there as one of the things that we do to cause our own furnace problems, because whether we mean to or not, like if I forget to change my oil all the time, eventually my car is going to stop running. Same thing with your furnace. If you forget to change your car's oil, your furnace will stop. I'm just kidding, people. Anyway, oh man, what an episode.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks for being
super
here.
Fun.
That is it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I hope it was helpful. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode of In the House. If you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, visit anyhourservices.com. I've been your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to In the House.